Brilliant. Thanks for joining us today. Mr. Goddard, Paddy just mentioned electric vehicles there. You've spoken a lot about electric cars, but yet in many countries the infrastructure's not there in place yet. They remain expensive. How do you conquer that? How do you go about changing that?
Well, obviously, the situation today is much better than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So it's progressing. It's slow. But I think at a certain point, it's going to accelerate. And it's going to accelerate because the battery is getting cheaper. You have many competition. You have a lot of developments, a lot of knowledge is coming, not only into the battery itself, but into the process of the battery. Second, a lot of countries are putting incentives to favor electric cars. And third, the infrastructure is developing, even though slowly. And where we are seeing the infrastructure developing, we're seeing the sales going up. And what's interesting is that today China represents more than 1/3 of the electric car market, was 5 years ago, it was absolutely absent from this market. So we're seeing a dynamic between markets, which in my opinion is going to accelerate.
And you've mentioned your intention to create an $8,000 electric car in China, which seems extremely cheap. How far away are you from that?
Well, what we are seeing that in China, what is really selling are the very low-cost electric cars. This is where the market is booming. So with our Leaf, which is the most sold electric car in the world, we are at a price point where the sales are just not taking off. So what we decided is to go after the market, what the market is asking for, and we are developing now a very cheap electric cars. Cheap means you go to the price points where these cars are selling in China, which is about $8,000. $8,000, including the incentive coming from the government. And our intention is to come a car that you can sell at $8,000, but without incentive. So we are in a phase of development. It will be localized in China with Chinese engineers and Chinese suppliers.
And how far off is that?
Well, I think our objective is to be on the market within a couple of years.
And when you look at Renault's position in the electric car market, do you feel you need to make more investment in the supply chain, where you look at competitors like Daimler and even Tesla owning the battery infrastructure? So where do you stand on that?
You know, we got involved into the battery technology at the beginning of our offensive. I just want to remind you that we were the first car makers to say we're going to go mass marketing electric car, and we announced it in 2008. So the first electric cars came from us. And at that moment, there was no batteries. There was absolutely no batteries capable of the kind of performance we wanted. So we had to develop our own battery. We create our own company. Now, since then, you have a lot of competition on batteries. And frankly, some of the companies doing a great job. I would like to mention that on top of our own batteries, we are sourcing batteries from LG Chemical in Korea. But then you have Panasonic, you have so many companies, Samsung, so many companies, a lot of Chinese coming into the battery technology. So you are at a point where, frankly, we don't have to continue to put so much resources in the battery. The suppliers are going to do it. We're going to maintain a heavy investment on research, the battery of the future, and leave competition and the suppliers develop the battery of today. So other car makers have different strategy, which is fine. But we want to concentrate our efforts on the car itself and use the existing suppliers, which are investing a lot of money in order and play competition.
Let's move on to driverless cars now. Today you announced the development of a product with Chronocam, a startup that you've invested in. Just talk me through that investment and what you guys are working on.
Well, you know, obviously when we look at the car of the future, which obviously is going to be zero emission, which means more electric, which is going to be much more autonomous, which is going to be much more connected, we obviously have to develop bricks of technologies that we're going to have to assemble at a certain point in time. So we cannot do everything by ourselves. That means there are a lot of things we can do by ourselves, but there are a lot of things we're going to have to cooperate with other companies, and there are a lot of things where we're going to have just to rely on outside company to do. So that's why we are cooperating with a lot of startups. We are giving the direction by saying this is the car as we see it 5 years, 10 years down the road. These are the bricks of technologies that we're going to be needing. And then we open it up to, you know, universities, startup, associate. We have a collaboration with NASA. Nissan collaborates with NASA, particularly because NASA is extremely powerful into remote control technology, which we're going to need. So you're going to have a lot of collaboration of this type. In this case, we are collaborating on captors and sensors, particularly to make sure that we can simulate the brain when you are in certain situation driving.
Sure. And a few months ago, you also announced your intention to bring out 10 different autonomous cars by 2020. Can you tell us more about where you are on that timeline? Is that a realistic timeline?
Yeah. Well, first, I would like to say that autonomous cars are different from driverless cars. So, because there is a lot of confusion, I understand that when you talk about autonomous car, you're covering both. Autonomous car, the driver is in the car, still in the car. He may not drive, but he's still in the car. Driverless cars is the car without a driver. You don't need anything. So I think the US administration has established a classification going from 0 to 4. 0 is a car with absolutely nothing automated in it. And then 4 is the car without a driver. So autonomous car is everything which is before 4. 1, 2, 3. And this is where we are concentrating our efforts today. And the first level that we launched in Japan, in a car which is a minivan, launched in Japan today, is autonomous car on a single lane on a highway, which is interesting. It was a test. We put it on a mass-marketed car. And what's interesting is we have a 60% take on this option. And this is a paying option. It's not, I mean, it is something which is more than $1,000 of price premium in order to get this option. And we have 60% take. And this is an autonomous drive on one single lane. We're coming at a level 2 in 2018, where you're going to be multiple lane autonomous drive on a highway. And then ultimately in 2020, where you're going to have city driving, which means the car is going to negotiate intersections into a city. Driverless cars are going to come after. But there is a lot of confusion because people see, oh, but there are some driverless cars, there are robo-taxi experience going on in Singapore, here and there. Yes, but our objective is a technology that you can use everywhere and flawless. And this is where the challenge is. I mean, making a driverless car in Tokyo is much easier than having a driverless car in Mumbai or in Cairo, because the conditions are not the same, and the codes are not the same, and the mapping is not the same. On top of this, getting a car with 99% right is much easier than a car at 100% right. So what we are working on, and that's why I think driverless cars will come ultimately, is making sure that it works everywhere, and it's flawless, which means 100% reliable. That's why I think it's going to take a little bit more time.
And in your opinion, what are the roadblocks to fully driverless cars then?
Well, the first roadblock is technology, is it needs to work everywhere, and it needs to be flawless. We're not there. We can make an experience in cities where the roads are clear, the mapping is clear, people respect the code of conduct, etc., etc. This is relatively easy. But you need to also test your technology in conditions which are a little bit more chaotic and try to see how this technology behaves. That's number one. Number two is regulation. As you know today, you have many countries testing many regulation, but as car makers, we're going to need some kind of coherence into the regulation, driving, allowing you to drive without your hands on the wheel, without your eyes on the road, doing something else. We're far from that. That's point number two. And third, you need the customer to trust enough the technology in order to buy in. And you know, this means that you need to answer a lot of questions. For example, the liability in case of these functions, how much you feel confident about giving up driving to the product. So all these hurdles need to be, but I'm very optimistic because this technology brings so much benefit for the consumer that we're going to go through all these challenges.
Speaking of regulation, what would you like to see from the next US president when we get the result tomorrow in terms of regulation on autonomous driving?
Well, frankly, I don't think it depends on the US president. In fact, we have one particular administration which is very important for us, which is the administration of traffic, highway, etc., NHTSA. And this is the administration which is regulating. So, and I think as long as car makers share the technology with this administration and they understand what are the limits, we are in good shape. What I'm seeing is the US administration or the European administration, Japanese administration, Chinese administration, very interested into this technology because they see the benefit they can get from it in terms of safety, in terms of better traffic management, and also in terms of making driving much more comfortable, much more efficient.
Tesla's autonomous driving features have been under the microscope here. They've been criticized around the safety, which is precisely one of the things that advocates say is great about driverless cars. Has any of that dampened confidence around autonomous driving?
No, frankly, I don't think, obviously it's always a problem when a competitor have a quality problem on a new technology. This make a lot of questions being asked, which is fine. But I think the benefit, when you have a technology which brings so much benefit, I don't think people are going to stop in front of one dysfunction or one accident or one problem to block this technology, because there is nothing fundamentally wrong into this technology, nothing fundamentally dangerous. I remember when we launched the electric car at the beginning in 2008, a lot of people wrote a lot of articles about the fact that batteries were dangerous. A lot of people, academicians, professors, wrote big articles saying, you know, you cannot put an electric car into a parking, you're going to have fires and you're going to have explosions, etc. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Obviously, there was a risk, but we were conscious of the risk, and we put the technology in place in order to make sure that these kind of things don't happen. I think on autonomous car, you're going to see the same thing.
And Mr. Ghosn, you've made a lot of investment into software, partnered with Microsoft, acquired Silfeo to boost your software capability. How much is that a defense against the likes of Apple and Google? What's your relationship like with Apple and Google? And do you want to become a software firm?
No, first, frankly, it's not a defense against anybody. I think car makers today see the development of connected services as a huge opportunity in front of them. And we're all going to go there. We don't know exactly where this is going to end, what is the size of the market, but we know that there's going to be a huge market that's going to develop over there. We know we cannot do it alone, so we see a lot of potential partnership, a lot of collaboration. We talk with Google, we exchange with them. We talk with Uber, we exchange with them. That means it's a very open, obviously everyone has his own idea about what he wants to do. So I don't think we are doing it in defense against something else. I think we see an opportunity of a market which is going to develop, and we want to make sure we bring something to this. Now, car makers, obviously we are mainly engineers company. I mean, we have 20,000, 30,000 engineers typically in a car maker. But except that these engineers, we're going to have to shift their competence. Obviously, some basic competence is going to have to remain. But more and more, what we need are computer skills, software engineers, and we don't have them. So what you're seeing is we are partnering with companies who have a lot of these engineers, or we are acquiring companies who have this kind of skills. And we need thousands of engineers in order to be able to do what we need to do in terms particularly of connected services.
And what's your ambitions in the software space? Because we've seen all different car makers investing in software, wanting to create their own in-car software. Do you want to become what Android is to smartphones, for example?
Well, I think what we want is first to make sure that when you are promoting your car and you're promoting your brand, connected services is an asset and it's not a handicap. If nobody wants to say, well, I have a great car, but I'm late in terms of functionalities and in terms of services. This is your basic line. And second, you have an opportunity because there are going to be a lot of things going through the car. That's why Uber, Apple, Google, they are interested in the car business, not to become a car maker, but particularly because they see an opportunity to develop a lot of services through the car. The car is moving from an object of transportation to a connected mobile space. It's a completely different thing. So even the architecture of the car, the internal architecture of the car is going to have to take this in consideration. I mean, you're going to be able to sit in a car, work in a car, connect in a car, which means that even the seating, the disposition of the place inside the car, facilitated by the fact that electric cars are becoming more and more popular, which means you don't need a transmission, the engine doesn't have to take so much places, you can go for in-wheel motors, and the motors are very small, so which is going to free a lot of space inside the car. So you can imagine a lot of screens, you can sit anywhere inside the car, a lot of changes, but these changes are not going to be only technical, but it's going to be even the way you're sitting into the car, the live in the car is going to change.
Yeah. How do you view a company like Uber? A lot of people have talked about Uber as a threat to car makers because it removes the need for car ownership. But today you announced the Get and Go micro scheme around owning one car together as a community. Does that lay the groundwork for your own ride-hailing service?
Yeah. Look, in 2016, the car industry will be selling 90 million cars, 90 million new cars. Next year, our forecast, most of the forecasts pointing to 92, 93 million cars. 92 to 93 million cars. Without any doubt, when you look at the percentage of these 90 million cars sold, which are shares, very small. So that the fact that this percentage is going to increase, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. We see this trend. I think there is part of the car park which is going to be better used, better shared. So I think there's going to be a big growth into shared cars, shared services. Now, is this going to become a threat to the second part of the industry? I don't see it. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I don't see it in the next 10 years because obviously we have a tendency to look at what happens in New York, in Tokyo, and in Paris, but we forget about what's happening in Moscow, in Beijing, in Mumbai, in Rio de Janeiro, and in Africa, where buying a car is more than a rational acquisition. So I think big part of the industry is going to continue to be ownership, personal space, connected, you don't want to share it, etc. But yes, there is a part which is going to develop, which is shared car and shared services. But I think you're going to have, it's not going to be that one is going to be threat to the other. Both are going to be growing, each one at its own pace.
Thank you. And on that note, we've got to wrap up. Our time's up. So round of applause for Mr. Ghosn, everyone. Thank you very much.